when the HOA let my entitled neighbor host a massive birthday party, resulting in 57 cars trampling my meticulously landscaped property, I decided it was time to teach them all a lesson they'd never forget. Consequently, I organized a surprise auction for the vehicles carelessly left behind. How would you react if you discovered your neighbor's luxury cars were about to be sold to the highest bidder, simply because they parked where they absolutely shouldn't have? Frankly, I never thought I'd become the neighborhood villain just for defending my own property, but that's precisely what happened last Saturday when my peaceful afternoon devolved into an absolute parking nightmare. My name is Ben, and I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for 15 years. My house sits on a comfortable 3 acres of land that backs up to a small, serene lake. Over the years, I've poured thousands of dollars and countless weekends into turning this place into my personal paradise. Undoubtedly, my favorite spot is the meadow that gently slopes down to the water, filled with native wildflowers, a few majestic old oak trees, and a winding stone path I laid painstakingly by hand. I was just returning from grocery shopping when I noticed something incredibly odd: a long line of cars turning into my private driveway. At first, I assumed they'd made a wrong turn, but as I pulled closer, my stomach plummeted. There were at least 20 vehicles parked haphazardly across my meadow, with more arriving seemingly by the minute. "Hey, what's going on here?" I called out, spotting a valet in a crisp red vest directing a large Mercedes SUV right onto my property. "We're handling parking for the Thompson party next door," he answered casually, almost unbelievably, as if this were completely normal. Flustered, I hurried inside, dropped my groceries unceremoniously on the counter, and marched straight next door to my neighbor's house. Brenda Thompson's mansion was elaborately decorated with pink balloons and a giant Sweet 16 banner. Loud music blasted from expensive speakers, and teenagers dressed in fancy clothes milled around the entrance. Brenda spotted me before I could even ring the doorbell. She wore a designer dress and flashed that perfect practice smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Ben, how lovely to see you," she said, effectively blocking my path to her door. "Enjoying this beautiful day." "Brenda, why are there dozens of cars parked all over my property?" I asked, making a conscious effort to keep my voice level despite my rising anger. Brenda's smile didn't waver for a second. "Oh, we're having Olivia's Sweet 16 today. Didn't you get the HOA notice?" "What notice?" She dug through her designer purse and pulled out a wrinkled piece of paper. "The HOA granted us a temporary easement for overflow parking. President Gregg approved it just this morning, see?" She pointed to a hasty signature scrawled at the bottom. I scanned the document, my anger building with each word. "I never agreed to this. Nobody contacted me." "Well, the board voted," Brenda stated matter-of-factly, her fake sympathy making my blood boil. "There's nothing you can do until tomorrow. Besides, it's just for today. And Olivia has so many friends. Where else would everyone possibly park?" As if on cue, a gleaming Porsche Cayenne drove directly over my flower bed, crushing the vibrant black-eyed Susans I'd planted just last spring. "Those cars need to be moved, now," I insisted firmly. Brenda's friendly mask slipped for just a second. "Look," she hissed, "all the important families in Willow Creek are here. Judge Miller's son, Dr. Chen's daughters, even Mayor Davis dropped off his twins. Do you really want to make a scene?" A group of parents nearby glanced our way. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. "This wasn't authorized by me," I reiterated, "and that document doesn't even specify which parts of my property they can use." Brenda's eyes narrowed perceptibly. "Don't be difficult, Ben. It's just for a few hours." With that, she turned away, calling out greetings to new arrivals and effectively dismissing me. Furious, I walked back to my property, documenting the extensive damage with my phone. tire tracks brutally cut through my carefully tended grass. Someone had carelessly knocked over the stone bird bath near my favorite oak tree. Worse still, a teenager was actually sitting on my private dock, dangling his feet in the water while texting. By sunset, an astonishing 57 vehicles had trampled my land. I counted each one meticulously, taking photos of license plates and the surrounding damage. Meanwhile, music and laughter drifted across the lake until well past midnight, while I sat in my darkened living room researching HOA bylaws on my laptop. What I discovered next made my hands shake with sheer outrage. The easement absolutely required written permission from the property owner, me. The document Brenda had dismissively waved in my face was incomplete and quite possibly fraudulent. Most importantly, however, I found a specific clause that would soon become the cornerstone of my response. Sunday morning brought a welcome quiet and the departure of most vehicles. However, 7 cars remained, parked haphazardly across my ravaged meadow. Apparently, their owners had enjoyed the party far too much to drive home. I watched from my window as Brenda emerged from her house in a luxurious silk robe, coffee cup in hand. She surveyed the party's aftermath with evident satisfaction, never once glancing toward the blatant destruction of my property. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about one out-of-control party. This was fundamentally about power and unchecked entitlement. Brenda had deliberately used her position on the HOA board to override my property rights, clearly thinking her social connections made her untouchable. She had absolutely no idea who she was dealing with. "Ben, what can I do for you this morning?" Greg's cheerful voice grated on my already frayed nerves. "You can start by explaining why you approved parking on my private property without my consent," I replied coldly. There was a distinct pause. "Well, Brenda said you'd verbally agreed but were out of town to sign the paperwork." "That's completely false," I stated flatly, watching a cardinal futilely try to return to its nest in a trampled bush. "I never agreed to anything." "Well, there must have been some miscommunication," Greg stammered, clearly flustered. "I'll look into it right away." "While you're looking into it," I added pointedly, "you should know there are still 7 cars abandoned on my land and significant damage to my landscaping." "I'm sure Brenda will make it right," he said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "She's a valued board member, you know, very generous with her time and contributions." That last word caught my attention. Contributions? Another pause. "To the community, of course," Greg added hastily. "Just last month, she donated $10,000 to the landscaping fund." Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. Brenda's generosity had effectively bought her influence. The timing was certainly no coincidence. "I'll expect a full accounting of this situation by the end of the day," I said firmly before hanging up. My next call was to a lawyer friend who specialized in property disputes. After I explained the entire situation, she gave me some very welcome news. "They've completely overstepped, Ben. The HOA absolutely cannot grant access to your private property without explicit written consent, especially not for a private event. Document everything and send me those photos." By noon, I had created a detailed report of the damages. Crushed plants, deep tire ruts in the lawn, trampled flower beds, oil stains marring my stone path, and trash carelessly scattered across the meadow. My initial estimate for repairs came to over $3,000, but it was while reviewing the HOA covenants again that I found my golden opportunity. Section 7. 4 stated clearly, unauthorized vehicles remaining on private property for over 24 hours may be managed at the owner's discretion following documented notification. Perfect. I promptly printed 7 official notices, each placed in a bright orange impossible to miss envelope, and a fixed one securely to each windshield. Notice: this vehicle is unlawfully parked on private property. If not removed by 5 p.m. Wednesday, it will be considered abandoned and subject to removal and/or management at the owner's expense. Then I made 3 crucial phone calls, one to a reputable towing company, one to a friend named Megan, who runs auctions, and one to rent sturdy portable fencing. By Tuesday afternoon, word had inevitably spread like wildfire through Willow Creek Estates. I was attempting to weed what little remained of my flower bed when Brenda stormed across her lawn toward me, her designer heels sinking into the soft ground with each furious step. "Remove those ridiculous notices immediately," she demanded, her face flushed with anger. "That blue Porsche belongs to my daughter's boyfriend, Kevin Foster, and the others belong to board members' children." I straightened up slowly, my garden gloves covered in soil. "The notices clearly state the vehicles must be removed by 5 p.m. tomorrow, Brenda. I'm simply following HOA protocol, specifically Section 7.4 regarding documentation and notification. This is completely unreasonable." Brenda's voice rose, attracting attention from another neighbor walking his dog. "It was just a party I never authorized on my property," I corrected her calmly but firmly. "Your guests caused thousands of dollars in damages." Brenda's expression shifted quickly to one of calculated reasonableness. "I'm sure we can work something out, Ben. The HOA maintenance fund could certainly cover any minor repairs." "The damages aren't minor, Brenda," I replied, holding her gaze, "and I've already documented everything meticulously for insurance purposes." "Insurance?" Her confident facade cracked slightly. "There's no need to involve insurance companies." "Oh, I disagree," I countered. "My policy specifically covers vandalism and trespassing incidents." Brenda's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're making a very big mistake, Ben. My husband golfs with half the neighborhood. People won't appreciate this kind of pettiness." "Is that a threat, Brenda?" I asked quietly. She gave a brittle, forced laugh. "Of course not. Just a friendly reminder that communities work best when people are reasonable." As she turned to leave, I called after her, "Wednesday, 5 p.m., Brenda." After that, according to Section 7.4 of the HOA covenants you seem to admire, the vehicles are officially considered abandoned. Brenda froze momentarily before continuing her retreat, phone already pressed tightly to her ear. Predictably, that evening, I received a call from Greg, panic evident in his voice. "Ben, whatever you're planning, stop it now. The board is meeting tonight to discuss this entire situation." "It's too late, Greg," I replied calmly. "Everything's already arranged for tomorrow." "What exactly are you planning?" Greg's voice quavered slightly. I smiled to myself. "Just exercising my rights under the covenants, Greg. The very same covenants you selectively enforced to allow 57 cars to destroy my property." "Be reasonable, Ben." "I have been more than reasonable," I interrupted sharply. "You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to ensure those vehicles are removed. After that, well, things get interesting." I hung up and continued my preparations. The security company had finished installing temporary, high-visibility cameras strategically around my meadow. The auction website was fully set up, pending activation. The portable fencing would arrive at dawn. As darkness fell, I sat on my back porch, watching fireflies rise from what remained of my meadow. For the first time since Saturday, a sense of calm washed over me. Brenda and the complicit HOA board had severely underestimated me, foolishly thinking I would simply roll over and accept their blatant entitlement as law. They were about to discover just how profoundly wrong they were. Wednesday morning arrived, shrouded in heavy fog, rolling off the lake, blanketing my property in a ghostly white veil. Undeterred, I sipped coffee on my porch, watching as the fencing crew quietly and efficiently installed portable barriers around each abandoned vehicle. Impressively, they completed the job before most of Willow Creek's residents had even finished their breakfast. Shortly after, my phone buzzed with a text from Greg. Board emergency meeting at 4 p.m. Your presence requested. I replied simply, can't make it. Prior commitments. By noon, the fog had lifted, revealing the spectacle. Predictably, curious neighbors were walking or driving slowly past my house, necks craning, trying to figure out what exactly was happening with the 7 fenced-in luxury cars displayed prominently on my meadow. I nodded politely to each passerby, continuing my work setting up a small podium near the property line. At precisely 2:37 p.m., a black Lexus screeched to a halt at my curb. A young man, dressed in expensive clothes, jumped out, running toward the fenced blue Porsche. "Hey, that's my car!" he shouted, rattling the fence vigorously. "What the heck is going on?" I walked over calmly, clipboard in hand. "Are you Kevin Foster?" "Yeah," he said, confusion momentarily replacing his anger. "How did you know? Your vehicle information is readily available from the DMV," I explained, showing him the laminated notice still attached to his windshield. "This car has been parked illegally on private property for over 96 hours now. The notice clearly stated it needed to be removed by 5 p.m. today." Kevin ran a hand frantically through his styled hair. "Look, I just got back from my dad's cabin. I didn't know about any notice." "Perhaps," I suggested mildly, "you should have considered the potential consequences before abandoning your vehicle on someone else's private property following an unauthorized party." "Just unlock the fence and I'll move it right now," he demanded, reaching for his keys. I checked my watch pointedly. "I'm afraid that's not possible until after 5 p.m. "What? Why?" His face reddened with indignation. "That makes no sense. The legal notification period, as stipulated in the notice in HOA Section 7.4, ends precisely at 5 p.m., I clarified. "Until then, everything stays exactly as is." "This is insane!" Kevin pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Olivia's mom. She'll straighten this out." "Please do," I said evenly, returning to my preparations. Within 20 minutes, Brenda's Mercedes roared up my driveway. She emerged like a thundercloud, designer sunglasses pushed atop her head, phone clutched tightly in her manicured hand. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, gesturing wildly at the fenced vehicles. "Kevin says you won't let him take his car." "The notices were exceptionally clear, Brenda," I replied, continuing to arrange chairs beside the podium. "All vehicles must be removed by 5 p.m., or they will be legally considered abandoned property." Brenda's eyes widened dramatically as she finally took in the auction signs I was setting up nearby. "An auction? You can't be serious." "Completely serious," I confirmed calmly. Section 7.4 of the HOA covenants, the very same ones you're typically so fond of enforcing, explicitly allows me to manage abandoned vehicles on my property at my discretion. "This is outrageous." Brenda's voice reached a pitch that made nearby birds take flight. "These are valuable cars. They belong to important people." I carefully set down a stack of auction paddles. Important people who trespassed on private property, caused significant damage, and then abandoned their vehicles for days. Actions have consequences, Brenda. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a menacing whisper. "My husband will sue you into bankruptcy." "For what exactly?" I asked pleasantly. "Following the precise HOA rules you used against me? Fortunately, I have documentation of everything: the unauthorized easement, the extensive property damage, the abandoned vehicles, the proper legal notifications. I've meticulously followed every single legal requirement." Brenda's face contorted with rage. She pulled out her phone again, furiously dialing. "Greg, get over here now and bring Sheriff Miller." While Brenda paced and made increasingly frantic calls, I finished my final preparations. A small refreshment table was set up near the podium. The auction website displayed prominent countdown timers for each vehicle. Multiple security cameras recorded everything from various angles. By 4:30 p.m., a considerable crowd had gathered. Neighbors I rarely spoke to lingered at the edges of my property, whispering among themselves. Several teenagers huddled near Kevin, who stood miserably by the fence surrounding his Porsche. Greg arrived with 4 other board members, all wearing expressions ranging from acute embarrassment to outright outrage. They huddled immediately with Brenda, casting nervous glances my way. "The sheriff is on his way," Greg announced, approaching me with forced confidence. "This has gone far enough, Ben." "I couldn't agree more, Greg," I replied evenly. "It went too far the moment 57 vehicles were directed onto my private property without my permission. We can discuss compensation for any damages," he offered, lowering his voice significantly. "But this auction absolutely needs to be called off immediately." "The auction goes live precisely at 6 p.m., I stated firmly, "unless, of course, the vehicles are removed before 5 p.m. Greg glanced nervously at his watch. "That's only 25 minutes from now." "Then I suggest you start arranging for their removal," I said reasonably. "We can't," Brenda interjected, joining our conversation abruptly. "The towing company can't possibly get here until 5:30, and the other owners are still driving back from various places." I shrugged nonchalantly. "Not my problem, Brenda. You created this situation when you directed people to park on my property without permission." Sheriff Miller's patrol car pulled up at precisely 4:45 p.m. The crowd parted respectfully as he approached, notebook already in hand. I recognized him from community events, but had never spoken with him directly. "Afternoon, folks," he said, his gaze shifting between me and the increasingly agitated board members. "Got a report about some kind of dispute here?" Predictably, Brenda jumped in before I could speak. "This person," she declared loudly, pointing at me, "is trying to steal our children's cars. It's completely illegal." Sheriff Miller turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Sir, several vehicles, I explained calmly, have been abandoned on my private property following an unauthorized event hosted next door. I have provided proper, documented notification according to Section 7.4 of the Willow Creek Estates HOA covenants. After the deadline passes at 5 p.m., I am legally exercising my right to manage the abandoned property." "Do you have documentation?" the sheriff asked professionally. I handed him my meticulously organized clipboard containing copies of everything: my property deed, the relevant HOA covenants, photos of the damage, copies of the bright orange notices, and time-stamped photos showing exactly when each notice was placed on each vehicle. Sheriff Miller reviewed the materials carefully while Brenda fumed beside him. "This is ridiculous," she finally burst out. "These are our children's vehicles. Tell him he can't do this." The sheriff looked up from my documentation. "Ma'am, based on everything I'm seeing here, the property owner appears to have followed proper procedure. The vehicles are, indeed, located on private property without authorization." "But the HOA approved it," Brenda insisted desperately. "Actually," I interjected smoothly, pulling out the wrinkled, hastily signed document she'd waved in my face on Saturday. "This purported easement is invalid. It explicitly required my signature as the property owner, which, as you can see, it does not have." And interestingly, when I called the HOA office this morning for clarification, they had absolutely no official record of any meeting ever taking place to approve this supposed easement. Sheriff Miller turned pointedly to Greg. "Is that true, Mr. President?" Greg's face drained of all color. "Well, there may have been some procedural oversights." "Procedural oversights?" I repeated incredulously, gesturing towards my damaged meadow. You allowed 57 vehicles to trespass on and damage my property based on a fraudulent document? Just then, Brenda's daughter, Olivia, pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. Please, she sobbed, don't sell Kevin's car. His dad will kill him and he'll break up with me. The crowd had grown even larger now, with more neighbors arriving constantly to witness the unfolding drama. Phones were out everywhere, recording. I spotted Mrs. Davis, who wrote the community newsletter, diligently taking notes. At 4:58 p.m., Greg pulled me aside again, his voice barely an audible whisper. Name your price, Ben. Just name your price to stop this madness. I looked at him steadily. This isn't about money, Greg. This is about respect for other people's property and actually following the rules. The same rules that are supposed to apply to everyone, including board members. The auction website displayed on my tablet showed the countdown, 1 minute remaining before bidding would officially open. The first lot, a 2023 Porsche 911 in sapphire blue, showed a starting bid of $50,000. Brenda suddenly grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging painfully into my skin. You can't do this to us. Do you have any idea who we are in this community? I removed her hand, firmly but gently. I know exactly who you are, Brenda. The real question is, do you? The clock struck 5 p.m. A soft chime sounded from my tablet as the auction countdown expired. Sheriff Miller checked his watch pointedly. It's 5 p.m. What happens now, sir? Every single eye in the growing crowd turned toward me, waiting expectantly for my next move. I nodded to Megan, my auctioneer friend, who stood ready at the podium. Just as she was about to speak, Brenda screamed, "Stop the bidding!" Her face turned bright red as she saw the Porsche's price hit $45,000 online within seconds. The crowd of curious neighbors murmured excitedly. I pretended not to hear her and signaled Megan to hold for a moment. "I can have you arrested," Brenda threatened, grabbing my arm again. Sheriff Miller gently removed her hand from my sleeve. "Ma'am, please don't make this worse for yourself," he said quietly but firmly. Touching someone without permission could be considered assault. Olivia sobbed loudly into her phone. "Daddy, please come home now. They're selling Kevin's car." Her husband, Richard, arrived just then, stepping out of his Range Rover, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit, clearly their lawyer. They huddled quickly with Greg. I signaled Megan to announce a brief 10-minute pause. "Let's talk inside," I suggested, my voice steady despite my racing heart. This was working even better than I dared to plan. My living room felt uncomfortably crowded, with Brenda, Richard, their lawyer, Greg, and the other board members squeezed onto my furniture. The air conditioner struggled against the palpable tension and summer heat. Brenda refused to sit, pacing agitatedly by my fireplace, while Greg kept checking his watch nervously. Richard's lawyer maintained a stoic expression. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Brenda spat, clutching her designer purse tightly. "Actually, Brenda, I'm not," I replied honestly. "I'd much rather be tending to my garden, the one your guests destroyed. But here we are." I slid a folder across my coffee table. Inside were 3 simple typed pages with plenty of blank space for signatures. "My terms are straightforward," I explained clearly. "First, the HOA admits in writing that they wrongfully granted permission to use my land without consent and pays for all damages. That comes to approximately $700 for landscaping repairs, kioi replacement, and full meadow restoration." Greg started to object, but I raised my hand. "I have detailed before and after photos and 3 independent landscaper estimates. The numbers are fair and fully documented. Second," I continued, "Brenda resigns from the HOA board immediately. Her position will be filled by someone elected properly, not just appointed by friends. Brenda's gasp was dramatic enough for a soap opera. Never! I've been on that board for 9 years. 9 years, I counted evenly, of bending rules for yourself and punishing others for minor infractions. Mrs. Peterson, across the street, was fined $500 for having the wrong shade of white trim last year, yet you hosted a party with unpermitted live music blaring until 2 a.m. last Saturday. Sheriff Miller, who'd followed us inside to observe, nodded slightly. He confirmed he'd been called about the noise complaint that night. And third, I finished, the HOA bylaws get formally amended to require explicit written permission from any property owner before their land can be used for any reason, public or private. No more vague, verbal agreements that mysteriously happen when someone is conveniently out of town. Through the window, I could see more cars arriving. Clearly the parents of the teens whose vehicles were currently fenced in my makeshift auction lot. One man in a business suit was examining his son's BMW, phone pressed tightly to his ear as he gestured angrily toward my house. "You have no right," Brenda started, but Greg cut her off. "What happens if we refuse?" he asked, his voice remarkably calm given the circumstances. "Then the auction continues," I stated simply. "I've already received significant interest from registered bidders in 3 different states. The vehicles were legally abandoned on private property after proper notification. It's completely legal." I opened my laptop to show them the live stream, where bidders were actively commenting. The Porsche already had 27 bids. Brenda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went deathly pale. "Kevin's father is threatening to sue us, personally," she whispered urgently to Greg. "He's a top corporate lawyer." For the first time, visible cracks appeared in her perfect facade. Her hand trembled slightly as she finally sat down. The doorbell rang, followed by loud, insistent knocking. Through the peephole, I spotted at least 5 very angry-looking parents on my porch. I turned back to the board members in my living room. "Decision time," I announced calmly. "I can open that door right now and explain exactly why their children's expensive cars are being sold off my front lawn, or you can sign these papers and I cancel the auction immediately." Marlowe reached for a pen without hesitation. "How do we know you'll actually stop the auction?" "Because," I replied, holding his gaze, "unlike some people in this room, I keep my word. Sheriff Miller is our witness." Brenda's mascara streamed down her cheeks as she watched Greg sign, followed by the other board members. "This is blackmail," she whispered hoarsely. "No, ma'am," Sheriff Miller corrected gently but firmly. "This is consequences. There's a very big difference." The knocking grew louder, and someone started calling Brenda's name from outside. "Sign or don't sign, Brenda," I said, pointedly checking my watch. "But in 5 minutes, that Porsche belongs to someone in Michigan." With a shaking hand, she finally signed the document. Moments later, cameras flashed as Brenda handed me the oversized check for $7,800 on my front lawn. Our local newspaper reporter scribbled notes furiously, while neighbors watched intently from across the street. Everyone in Willow Creek Estates, it seemed, had heard about the almost auction by now. "Smile, Brenda," I whispered through gritted teeth as the photographer lined up a shot. "It's important to be a good sport when you lose." Her eyes shot daggers at me, but somehow she managed a tight, forced smile for the camera. The headline, I knew, would read something like, "HOA settles dispute after unauthorized use of private property." I'd made sure of that by inviting the press myself. "This is just the beginning," Brenda hissed under her breath as soon as the photographer turned away. "You've made powerful enemies today, Ben." I accepted the check calmly. "Actually, Brenda, I've just enforced the rules that should have been followed all along. That's hardly making enemies. It's called upholding community standards. Behind us, workers were already busy replanting my damaged garden beds. The deep tire marks scarring my meadow would take longer to fully repair, but the koi pond was being cleaned and refilled today. I'd insisted that all repairs begin immediately as part of the settlement agreement. That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Brenda's husband, Richard, standing awkwardly on my porch, alone this time. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low. "There's something you should know." I hesitated for only a moment before waving him inside. He declined my offer of coffee and sat stiffly on the edge of my couch. Brenda didn't tell me the full extent of what she'd done until after the auction had already started, he explained, staring intently at his hands. "I want to apologize personally. Our daughter's birthday party was absolutely not worth damaging someone's property like that." His sincerity surprised me. "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that," I said simply. "There's more," he continued, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "For some time now, Brenda's she's been using HOA funds to renovate parts of our house, classifying purely personal expenses as community improvements. That's why she fought so desperately hard to stay on the board." My mouth fell open. "That's illegal." "Yes," he nodded grimly. "And once the new board inevitably audits the books, which I'm sure they will, it'll all come out. I've been trying to convince her for months to return the money quietly before that happens." 2 weeks later, I received a formal invitation to attend an emergency HOA meeting. The community center buzzed with palpable tension as I took my seat. Nearly every homeowner in Willow Creek Estates had shown up after hearing swirling rumors of financial misconduct. Retired Judge Samuel Wright, who'd been swiftly elected to replace Brenda, called the meeting to order. "Following a comprehensive financial audit," he announced gravely, "we have discovered approximately $42,000 in misappropriated HOA funds spanning the past 3 years. Gasps rippled through the crowded room. Someone near the back shouted, "Where's Brenda?" "Mrs. Thompson has resigned from the community entirely," Judge Wright stated. "Her husband, Mr. Thompson, has fully reimbursed all misused funds with substantial interest. They have listed their home for sale, effective immediately." I spotted Richard slipping in quietly through a side door, looking utterly exhausted. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and he gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. After the meeting concluded, several neighbors who'd previously ignored me for years stopped to chat. Mrs. Peterson from across the street hugged me tightly. "Ben," she whispered, "you did what none of the rest of us ever had the courage to do. You stood up to her." 6 months later, my fully restored property hosted the annual Willow Creek Estates summer picnic. My once damaged meadow bloomed vibrantly with native wildflowers, and children played tag happily around the new gazebo I'd built near the lake. Fittingly, the HOA had voted unanimously to name it the Community Outlook, a subtle joke, perhaps, about keeping a watchful eye on things going forward. Greg approached, carrying 2 tall glasses of lemonade. He'd remained on the board, but had, surprisingly, become an unlikely ally in reforming our community's rules and regulations. "You wouldn't believe the positive change in this place, Ben," he said, handing me a drink. "Property values are actually up, resident complaints are way down, and for the first time ever, we had more volunteers than positions available for the garden committee. It's amazing what happens when people feel that they're being treated fairly and the rules apply equally to everyone," I replied, watching the sunset paint the lake in hues of gold and orange. Just then, a familiar Porsche pulled carefully into my driveway. Brenda's daughter, Olivia, stepped out, no longer the crying teenager from auction day, but a composed young woman. "Sorry I'm late," she called, carrying a homemade pie. College applications took forever. She'd started visiting me regularly, initially to apologize profusely for her mother's behavior, but later because we discovered a shared, genuine interest in environmental science. I had been helping her navigate the complex process of applying to universities with strong ecology programs, a path completely different from the business schools her mother had relentlessly pushed. "Mom sold the house yesterday," she told me quietly, as we walked together along the lakeshore path I had painstakingly restored. "They're moving to Arizona next month." Dad seemed relieved, honestly, but Mom, she's still incredibly angry at everyone here. "And you?" I asked gently. Olivia smiled, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance over the water. "I'm applying early decision to State University's environmental program," she said with quiet confidence. "It's my choice, not hers." As the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, Judge Wright raised his glass in a toast. "To boundaries respected," he declared, "and lessons learned." I looked around at my neighbors, now genuinely friends, and realized something powerful. Sometimes standing your ground firmly isn't just about winning a single battle. It's about having the courage to potentially transform an entire community into something fundamentally better, fairer, and stronger than it was before. This story serves as a powerful reminder that respecting personal property and community rules is crucial for harmony. Standing up for your rights, even when facing intimidation or perceived power imbalances, is not just permissible, but necessary. Doing so calmly, legally, and with documentation can not only resolve personal grievances, but also expose larger issues and lead to positive, lasting change for an entire community. Fairness and accountability matter. What do you think? Have you ever faced a similar situation with neighbors or an HOA? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more.